The footage no one was supposed to see. The palace had always been a place of silence. Not peaceful silence,
Hi
controlled
everyone,
silence.
I made a princess storybook.
The kind where every
Look, this is me
footstep
and my
echoed
friends.
status,
It's a
and every
magical
whisper
adventure.
carried power. Princess Charlotte learned that before she learned multiplication tables. And on that morning, as sunlight slid across
look
polished
absolutely
marble
beautiful, my
floors,
dear.
she
Thank
sensed
you.
something
I'm
was
so
wrong
happy.
long before
I'm
anyone
so
else
proud of
did.
you.
Because children noticed tone before words. And Camilla's tone had changed. Charlotte stood near the private gallery corridor, waiting for her art tutor. She held a small sketchbook against her chest, pages filled with horses, gardens, and security guards she liked to draw as superheroes. She liked drawing guards because they made her feel safe.
The schedule is
Especially
tight, we must
Officer
be
Daniel,
precise.
tall,
Understood, the
calm,
team is ready.
patient.
The
The
preparations
one who
are
always
complete.
knelt to talk to her at eye level.
The croissants are
But today
delightful
he
this
wasn't
morning.
at his usual
Indeed,
post.
the cook has outdone
Instead,
himself.
another
I
guard
trust
stood
the
there,
evening's events are
stiff,
clear.
quiet,
Gentlemen,
avoiding
the
eye
reports
contact.
confirm our initial
Charlotte
findings.
felt
We
the
must
shift
proceed with
immediately.
the outlined measures
"Where's
immediately."
Daniel?" she asked softly. The guard hesitated. "He's assigned elsewhere today, Your Highness." Children hear the truth hidden inside hesitation. Charlotte nodded slowly, but her small fingers tightened around her sketchbook. Across the corridor, Camilla approached. Elegant, composed, perfect posture.
We must
To
address these
outsiders, she
challenges
looked
together.
exactly like
I
royalty
agree,
should
but we
look.
need a unified
But
approach.
Charlotte
Precisely,
noticed the
let's
tiny
review the
details
proposals.
adults ignored. The tighter jaw, the faster footsteps. The way Camilla's smile appeared too quickly, like it was being switched on. "Charlotte, darling," Camilla said, reaching out. Charlotte stepped closer automatically. She was polite. She was trained to be. But Camilla's hand didn't rest on her shoulder gently like usual. It gripped, firm, controlling, not painful, but not kind. Charlotte froze. "Stand properly," Camilla whispered, voice low and sharp enough only Charlotte could hear. Charlotte tried to adjust her posture. But Camilla's hand moved higher, resting against the side of her neck. Not choking, not violent, but possessive, dominating. Charlotte's breathing changed, small, quick breaths. Across the corridor, one security camera quietly recorded everything. Not because anyone expected something bad, but because royal security records everything. Always. "Remember who you represent," Camilla whispered. Charlotte nodded quickly. She didn't cry. She didn't pull away. Because she had already learned something many adults never learn. Power is quiet. And fear inside powerful rooms looks like obedience. Camilla released her. The moment ended. To anyone walking by, nothing would have looked wrong. Just a grandmother adjusting posture. Just family correction. Just routine. But Charlotte rubbed her neck absent-mindedly, not from pain. From discomfort. From confusion. From the feeling that something private had just been taken from her. That night, security reviewed routine footage. Most
Hi
nights,
everyone,
footage
I
review
made
was
a princess
boring.
storybook.
Doors
Look,
opening.
this is me and my friends.
Staff walking.
It's a magical
Routine movement.
adventure.
But Officer Daniel was back on duty, and when he scanned corridor camera 4, something made him stop. Rewind. Play. Rewind. Play. His jaw tightened. Because Daniel knew Charlotte's normal body language. And this wasn't it. He watched Charlotte freeze. Watched her breathing change. Watched the way her shoulders stiffened under Camilla's hand. There was no obvious crime. No clear violence. But Daniel had worked child protection cases before royal security. And he knew something most people didn't. Kids don't fake that kind of stillness. Protocol said escalate unusual behavior patterns. But Camilla was senior royal authority. Escalation meant paperwork. Reports. Daniel watched the footage again. Then he made a decision that would quietly change palace history. He flagged the clip for internal review. The review reached Prince William's private security liaison first. Then legal. Then, after hours of quiet internal discussion, it reached William himself. William watched the footage alone. What? Then again. Then again. He didn't shout. He didn't react outwardly at all. But inside, something ancient activated. Not royal duty. Not public image. Something simpler. Something older. Father. He paused on the frame where Charlotte's breathing changed. He knew that moment. Every parent does. The exact second a child stops feeling safe. William stood slowly. "Who else has seen this?" he asked quietly. "Only clearance-level security and legal review, sir." "Good." His voice stayed calm. Too calm. The dangerous kind of calm. That night, William visited Charlotte's room. She was drawing again. Another guard drawing. "Get, Jill." Big smile. "Hey, Poppet," William said softly. Charlotte smiled, genuine, immediate. The kind reserved only for people children fully trust. "Can I sit?" he asked. She nodded. He sat beside her. No pressure. No interrogation. Just presence. After a few minutes he asked gently, "Did anything make you feel uncomfortable today?" Charlotte didn't answer immediately. She kept coloring. Then finally, "Sometimes grown-ups hold too tight." William's chest tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "Did someone hold too tight today?" Charlotte nodded once. Small. Certain. William closed his eyes briefly, then opened them, and smiled gently.
Absolutely beautiful.
"Thank you for telling me."
Thank you. I'm
The
so
next
happy.
morning, palace
so
legal
proud of you.
advisors were called. Private. Off record. Security command attended. So did senior royal advisors. No press. No announcements. Just closed doors. And evidence. William didn't yell. Didn't accuse. He simply played the footage. And let silence do the work. Then he said something that would ripple through palace structure forever. "From this moment forward, unsupervised private access to my daughter is restricted." Someone shifted uncomfortably. "Is this temporary, sir?" an advisor asked carefully. William didn't look away from the screen. No. The word landed like stone in water. Heavy. Final. Part 1 ending emotional beat. Sometimes justice doesn't start with punishment. Sometimes it starts with protection. And sometimes the most powerful decisions in history are made by parents who simply decide. Enough. The palace divide. By morning the palace felt different. Not loud. Not chaotic. But tighter. Like air before a storm. Staff didn't talk openly. They never did. But small signals traveled faster than words ever could. Extra security clearances. Closed-door meetings. Schedules shifting quietly without explanation. And one change that everyone noticed. Princess Charlotte was never alone in certain corridors anymore. Not officially announced. Not written anywhere public. But enforced with quiet precision. Officer Daniel walked 2 steps behind Charlotte as she moved through the east wing. Not hovering. Not obvious. Just present. Charlotte noticed. Children always notice patterns. "Are you back for good?" she asked him quietly. Daniel smiled gently. "Yes, Your Highness." Charlotte nodded. She didn't ask why. Because something inside her already understood. Across the palace, Camilla noticed too. Powerful people always feel when control shifts, even before they see evidence. Her meetings suddenly included more advisors. Her schedule requests were reviewed. Her access to certain private family areas required coordination. No one said restriction. But that's exactly what it was. At breakfast that morning, tension sat at the table like an uninvited guest. Silverware moved quietly. Porcelain touched saucers carefully. William remained calm. Camilla remained composed. But neither of them filled silence the way they once had. Camilla finally spoke. "Security seems enthusiastic today." William sipped tea before answering. "Security exists to prevent problems." His tone was neutral. Polite. Professional. But final. Camilla studied him. She had lived around power long enough to recognize when someone had crossed an invisible line. And William had. Later that afternoon, senior palace staff gathered in a private administrative chamber. Not an official council. Not documented. But very real. Topics discussed. Family optics. Public stability. Institutional continuity. Media containment planning just in case. Because palaces don't prepare for crisis. They prepare for perception of crisis. One senior advisor spoke carefully. "If this becomes known, it could create narrative risks." Another answered quietly. "If it becomes known we ignored it, the risks double." Silence followed. Because everyone in that room understood one thing. This wasn't about one moment of footage anymore. This was about power shifting from tradition to protection. Meanwhile, Charlotte's world felt smaller. But safer. And children will choose safety over freedom every time. Even if they don't know how to explain why. That evening, Charlotte sat with her art tutor again. But today her drawings were different. The guards were still superheroes. But now they stood closer to the princess in every picture. Always between her and shadows. The tutor noticed. Adults trained in child development always notice symbolic changes first. "Your guards are very strong," the tutor said gently. Charlotte nodded. "They make sure nothing bad gets close." The tutor didn't ask follow-up questions. Some truths must come from children in their own time. In another wing, Camilla met privately with 2 of her longest trusted advisors. "They're adjusting access protocols," one said carefully. "I've noticed," Camilla replied. "Do you want us to challenge it formally?" Camilla paused. Because formal challenges create records. Records create history. And history can become evidence. No, she said finally. Not yet. But something inside her had shifted. Because power rarely disappears. It adapts. It waits. It studies. That night, William met with legal and child welfare consultants privately. Not royal protocol experts. Child behavioral experts. Because he wasn't thinking like a future king. He was thinking like a father. What matters most right now? He asked them. One consultant answered simply. Consistency. Children recover fastest when safety changes stay consistent.
Understood. The team is ready.
William
The
nodded
preparations are
and made
complete.
another
Good.
quiet decision. These boundaries weren't temporary. They were permanent. Inside the palace, staff loyalty lines began shifting. Not dramatically. Not rebelliously. But quietly. Security staff leaned more toward William's direct command structure. Household staff became more cautious about information flow. Private aides started documenting interactions more carefully. Because when power shifts, survival becomes administrative. Rumors started, not outside. Inside. Quiet ones. The most dangerous kind. Something happened. William is changing protocols. Legal was involved. Child welfare consultants were brought in. Each rumor incomplete. But together they formed a picture. And inside historic institutions, once staff sense protection is being prioritized over hierarchy, they adapt fast. Because safety is easier to morally support than status. 3 days later, William walked Charlotte to her riding lesson personally. Not scheduled. Not announced. Just done. Charlotte held his hand tighter than usual. Not scared. Just grounded. Are things different? She asked quietly. William looked down at her.
The croissants are
Yes,
delightful
he
this morning.
said.
Indeed.
But different can
the
be
cook has
safer.
outdone herself.
She
I
thought
trust
about
the evening's
that.
events are clear.
Then nodded. Children don't need full explanations. They need emotional truth. Across the grounds, Camilla watched from a second-floor window. Not angry. Not emotional. Just calculating. Because legacy isn't built in moments. It's built in patterns. And the pattern was changing. That evening, internal communications issued a subtle update. Family access protocols updated to reflect enhanced safeguarding alignment. Corporate language. Legal language. Safe language. But inside it lived one simple message. Things will not go back to how they were. And across the palace, staff felt it. Not through announcements. Through behavior. Through posture. Through who stood where. Through who walked beside Charlotte now. Part 2 Emotional closing beat. Institutions don't break in one moment. They change slowly. Until one day everyone wakes up and realizes, the center of power has moved. And this time, it moved toward protecting the smallest person in the room. The decision that changes everything. The palace had survived wars. It had survived scandals. It had survived centuries of power shifts disguised as tradition. But what it had never truly faced
Gentlemen,
was a
the
future
reports
king
confirm our
choosing
initial
protection
findings.
over
We must
protocol.
proceed with the
The
outlined
meeting was
measures
scheduled
immediately.
under a neutral title. Family Operations Alignment Review. No one outside senior clearance understood what it really meant. But everyone inside that room did. The long oak table reflected chandelier light in perfect symmetry. Order. Structure. History. Everything the institution valued. William entered last. Not for dramatic effect. Simply because he had stopped rushing for rooms that should wait for him. Camilla sat 3 seats from the head. Advisors flanked both sides of the table. Legal sat near the center. Security leadership stood along the wall, not seated. Symbolic. Because protection was now standing, not advising. William sat. Placed a single folder on the table. Closed. He didn't open it yet. Instead he looked around the room slowly. Making eye contact with every person. Not as royalty. As decision maker. I want clarity, he said calmly. Not discussion. Not theory. Clarity. Legal spoke first. Your updated access directive is fully within parental authority scope. Pause. However, permanently redefining interfamily access at this level creates institutional precedent. William nodded. I understand. Silence. Because everyone expected him to soften. To modify. To compromise. He didn't. Security spoke next. From safeguarding perspective, consistency increases emotional stability outcomes. Translation. If you remove protection later, you cause more damage. William finally opened the folder. Inside. Behavioral reports. Footage stills. Child response pattern notes. Consultant summaries. Not dramatic evidence. Not accusations. Just patterns. Clear. Cold. Clinical. He slid the folder to the center. No speeches. No accusations. Just facts. Camilla spoke carefully. Are we creating policy from interpretation? William met her gaze. No, he said quietly. We're creating policy from responsibility. No raised voice. No visible anger. But the air shifted. Because calm conviction is harder to challenge than emotional reaction. One senior advisor tried again. Public interpretation risk remains significant if structural family separation becomes visible. William leaned back slightly. And what's the risk if protection fails? No one answered. Because everyone in that room understood modern public reality. Institutions survive scandal. They don't survive perceived child neglect. William closed the folder again. Then said the sentence that would change palace structure permanently. Effective immediately, enhanced safeguarding protocol becomes permanent family policy. The word permanent echoed louder than any shouted argument ever could. Legal wrote notes. Security nodded once. Advisors exchanged looks they tried to hide. Because permanent meant something historic. The institution had just bent toward modern accountability. Camilla remained composed. But internally she understood. This wasn't about winning an argument. This was about losing access to a future she assumed was guaranteed. The meeting ended without ceremony. No announcements. No press. No public statement. Just paperwork that would quietly reshape decades of invisible power structure. Outside the room, staff sensed it instantly. Because staff always know when meetings change history. Even when no one tells them why. That afternoon, internal routing updated. Charlotte's movements auto-linked to designated protection teams. Family gathering protocols updated. Private wing access routing modified. Not dramatic, but absolute. 3 hours later, William walked through the palace gardens alone. Something he hadn't done in months. Not because he needed space. Because he needed perspective. His phone buzzed. Message from Charlotte's tutor. Charlotte seemed lighter today. He read it twice, then placed the phone back in his pocket. And for the first time in days, exhaled fully. Inside the palace, Camilla sat alone in a private sitting room. Not angry. Not emotional. Just thinking. Because people raised around power don't react loudly when power shifts. They adapt. They wait. They observe new patterns. But something was undeniable now. The center of emotional authority in the palace had shifted to one simple idea. The child comes first. That evening, Charlotte ran down a corridor toward William. Not formally. Not rehearsed. Just like a normal child who knows where safety lives. Papa, she called. He turned instantly. Knelt as she reached him. Can we watch the horse movie tonight? He smiled. Of course. No politics. No protocol. Just a father and daughter negotiating bedtime entertainment. And in that moment, history quietly rewrote itself. Not through speeches. Not through public statements. But through one parent deciding. Legacy means nothing if safety isn't inside it. Part 3 Emotional Closing Beat. Real power isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. Because the strongest decisions are the ones made when no one is watching. And still never get reversed. Forever means forever. Time didn't announce the change. It never does. It simply moved forward, quietly, steadily, carrying decisions with it like stones dropped into deep water. And inside the palace, life adjusted around a new center of gravity. Weeks passed. Then months. Then seasons. No public statements were ever made. No official explanation was ever given. But inside the palace, everyone knew. Some doors were now permanently closed. And others had opened wider than ever before. Charlotte grew. Not dramatically.
We must address
not
these
suddenly.
challenges together.
Just the
I
way
agree,
children
but we
grow
need a
when they
unified
feel safe
approach.
enough to
Precisely,
focus on
let's
being
review the
children.
proposals.
Her laugh returned to hallways. Her drawings became brighter again. Her guards in her sketchbook still had capes, but now they smiled more. Officer Daniel remained assigned to her extended protection detail. Not because she was fragile. Because she was valued. And there is a difference. Palace staff adapted faster than anyone outside would ever understand. New staff training quietly included expanded safeguarding language. Family proximity guidelines became standardized policy. Documentation increased, not out of fear. Out of clarity. Because when protection becomes policy, everyone breathes easier. Camilla adjusted too. Publicly nothing changed. Events attended. Ceremonies completed. Photos taken. Smiles exchanged. The public saw continuity. The institution saw stability. But internally, lines had been redrawn with permanent ink. Not hostile lines. Not dramatic lines. Just boundaries. Clear. Non-negotiable. Quietly enforced. William never spoke about the footage again. Not to advisors. Not to staff. Not even to close friends. Because some decisions don't need defending once they're made. Instead, he focused on patterns. Presence at Charlotte's events increased. Unscheduled check-ins became normal. Family time became visibly prioritized inside palace scheduling. And something subtle began happening across the institution. Staff stopped seeing this as reaction. They started seeing it as leadership. Years later, Charlotte stood taller. More confident. Still observant in the quiet way children who grow up around power often are. But lighter. Grounded. Secure in ways that can't be taught, only felt. One afternoon, as a teenager, she walked through the same corridor where everything had once shifted. She paused near the same camera. Not because she remembered consciously, but because the body remembers safety and danger long after the mind moves on. Officer Daniel, older now but still calm, stood nearby. She smiled at him. Not formally. Not royally. Just human. "Still watching everything?" she asked. He smiled back. "Always, Your Highness." She nodded. And walked forward without hesitation. And that was the real victory. Not protection in the moment. Confidence after the moment. Across the palace, safeguarding protocols became permanent institutional doctrine. Not announced. Not marketed. But embedded. Future staff would assume it had always been that way. Because the strongest cultural changes happen when no one remembers when they started. Camilla continued her public role with precision. Professional. Controlled. Respected in formal settings. But history would remember something else quietly. The moment influence stopped being automatic. And started being conditional. William aged into leadership with something different than tradition alone. Credibility. The modern kind. The kind built on visible priorities. The kind people don't have to be told to trust. One evening years later, during a private family dinner, Charlotte laughed so hard at something trivial that she nearly knocked over her water glass. William caught it before it fell. They both laughed. And the moment passed. Small. Normal. Unremarkable. But those small normal moments were exactly what he had been protecting all along. Outside, the world would continue debating monarchy, power, legacy, and history. But inside one palace hallway, one truth had already been decided years ago. No title. No tradition. No expectation. Outweighs a child feeling safe. And that decision never got reversed. Final emotional closing. History often celebrates crowns, wars, speeches, power moves made in public view. But sometimes, the most important legacy decision in an institution's history happens in a quiet room, over a piece of footage, when one parent looks at a screen and decides, forever means forever. The legacy no one could undo. History rarely changes in headlines. It changes in policies people stop questioning. It changes in habits that feel normal to the next generation. And inside the palace, the decision made years earlier had already become something bigger than one moment. It had become culture. New staff entered service under rules they never thought to challenge. Safeguarding briefings were no longer special sessions. They were standard orientation. Family proximity rules weren't adjustments. They were baseline expectations. Documentation wasn't viewed as distrust. It was viewed as professionalism. And the most powerful shift of all? No one framed protection as emotional anymore. They framed it as leadership. Years later, when Charlotte began taking on more public responsibilities, advisors noticed something unusual about her presence. She listened longer than most royals before speaking. She made direct eye contact with junior staff. She remembered names. Security teams reported something quietly consistent. She checked on them the way they checked on her. One afternoon, during preparation for a public youth welfare initiative, a junior staff coordinator accidentally mixed up briefing folders. Small mistake. Normal mistake. But the coordinator froze, expecting correction, maybe embarrassment. Charlotte simply slid the correct folder over and said, "Happens to everyone. We just fix it." The coordinator later told a colleague something simple but powerful. She makes mistakes feel survivable. And inside institutions, that changes everything. William watched these moments from a distance more often now. Not because he was less involved. Because he trusted what he had helped build. Not control. Not fear. Stability. One evening, during a private planning meeting about future royal modernization initiatives, a senior advisor said something unexpected. The safeguarding doctrine has improved staff retention and internal trust metrics. It was said like operational data. But William understood the deeper meaning. When people feel safe, they perform better. When children feel safe, they grow stronger. When institutions protect the vulnerable, they gain legitimacy. Outside the palace, public perception slowly shifted too. No major announcement ever explained why. But journalists began describing the next generation of royal leadership differently. Measured. Emotionally intelligent. Grounded. Not dramatic words, but durable ones. Camilla's public legacy settled into something quieter over time. Respected for ceremonial steadiness. Known for institutional continuity. But no longer assumed to be central to future structural direction. And in historical institutions, being peripheral is its own kind of ending. The palace itself began subtly influencing other institutions. Government child safeguarding consultants referenced palace protocol models. International royal households requested structural guidance. Not publicly. Quietly. Because credibility spreads through results, not press releases. Years later, Charlotte stood on a balcony during a youth safety initiative event. Below her, thousands of young people held banners about dignity, respect, and protection. She read her speech. Clear. Calm. Measured. But one line stood out. Strength isn't how much power you hold. It's how safe people feel when you're the one holding it. The crowd applauded. But inside palace walls, staff exchanged looks. Because they knew. That sentence didn't come from speechwriters. It came from experience. That night, Charlotte walked past the old corridor again. Different lighting now. Upgraded systems. New cameras. New staff. New generation. But the feeling was different too. Not heavy. Not tense. Just normal. And sometimes normal is the greatest victory of all. Officer Daniel had retired years earlier. But his training protocols still shaped new security recruits. One line from his training manual remained unchanged. Protection is not about reacting to danger. It's about making safety feel permanent. William, older now, walked slower through palace gardens one evening. Not weak. Just reflective. He watched younger staff laugh during shift change. Watched Charlotte speak confidently with advisors twice her age. Watched the institution breathe differently than it had decades earlier. And he understood something most leaders never do. The most important decision he ever made was the one no one outside ever fully saw. Because legacy isn't built in ceremonies. It's built in quiet moments where someone chooses protection and refuses to undo it later. Final story closing. Generations later, history books would record laws, speeches, and public reforms. But inside the palace archives, one internal policy update would sit quietly in digital storage. Dry language. Technical wording. No emotion. But behind it lived a moment where history bent toward something stronger than tradition. Toward something older than monarchy. Toward something universal. A parent deciding. If safety changes once, it stays changed. Forever.